What's going on, guys? This is John here from Hot Take Hockey, and today I'm going to be doing the 2018-2019 preview to the Chicago Blackhawks, who, of course, had a rough season last year, and going into the summer, they definitely had to reevaluate the future of this team. Before I get started, I definitely want to let you guys know for our channel, we're going to be doing a lot of live streams this year, a lot of live reactions to games, and post-game stuff, as well as previews like this. So jump on now. Please subscribe to our channel. Like our videos if you like them, and comment your opinions. I'm going to let you guys know after our next videos coming up. But just keep in touch with us, and we're pretty happy that we get to communicate with a lot of hockey fans. So let's get started in the video. The 2017-2018 Blackhawks definitely did not do very well, finishing 7th in the Central Division. But the positive side is they did get a high draft choice. They got the opportunity to select a defenseman in Adam Boqvist, who is second on international scouting lists. He was definitely one of the better defensemen in the draft. If you take out Rasmus Dahlin, there was a crop of 4 or 5 defensemen that were really good in this year's draft. And of course, Chicago got one of them. Puck-moving defenseman, definitely a bright future for Adam Boqvist. Do I think he's going to crack the roster this year? Probably not. And that's something especially that we're going to talk about in this video, how the roster and lineup is going to shape up for this Blackhawks team going into the 2018-2019 season. So for me, just a quick preview and prediction on where I actually see this team going before I even get into who's on the roster. I think for Jonathan Toews, who's making $10.5 million, obviously extremely overpaid considering you just look at all the rankings that were even released this summer, top 20 centers, top 50 players, etc., etc. Jonathan Toews' name has not been mentioned anymore. In my opinion, he's still an unreal two-way guy in that regard, but just his offense has gone down the drain completely compared to what we saw before. But it goes to the other guy that is also making $10.5 million in Patty Kane. And on the other side, I'm getting really frustrated with people saying that Patrick Kane's no longer a top 10 player. Because in my opinion, if you watch this guy play, it's not up for debate in my opinion at all. The skill set, the IQ, the speed, just the decision making in general. You see some of the highlight plays that he makes, just the spin around a pass to Nick Schmaltz. You see just those type of plays. Not many players in the league can make those type of plays. I'm seeing guys ranking him 30th in top 50. That's just unrealistic. So in my opinion, Patty Kane has the opportunity to lead this team back into the playoffs. Of course, I'm not just going to throw all the weight onto him when I'm talking about this team because, for example, there's other teams like a John Tavares with the Islanders last year, and Matthew Barzal. There's only so much a player or two can do for the team. You obviously need a surrounding core. So for Patty Kane, that's exactly what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about the players that could potentially step up and hopefully give him a decent supporting cast going into the season. And for me, the actual prediction, obviously we're going to talk about that in our official Hot Take Hockey prediction videos, but I don't see the Blackhawks making it far in the playoffs if they do. To me right now, back to how I was describing Buffalo, and I'm not trying to, Blackhawks fans, I hope you don't get too pissed because I'm not trying to shove the Blackhawks down the trash here, but it's at this point where Toews is past the prime unless he shows it this year, but for sure Keith and Seabrook are past the prime. Crawford's not the guy he used to be 3 or 4 years ago, and Patty Kane's really the only guy I feel can be really influential to this team. So right now I have them as a fringe team. Like I said, that's probably 9 or 10 spot in the West, around there, as well as 4 or 5 spot in the Central. I don't think they're going to finish last in the Central again. Like, that would be a huge disappointment. And then if that would happen, then you're going to start seeing like a strip. But I'm giving this team high hopes. I'm going to say 4 in the Central, because the Central is quite competitive, with teams like Nashville, with teams like St. Louis. St. Louis is definitely a team on the rise. We'll talk about a lot of them this year. But yeah, so that's my prediction. Let's just jump right into like roster and lineup predictions. So just to give like a little insight, and just right there in the detail, like differential of -27, and that just gives like the idea of like how bad the defense last year was for Chicago. I mean, Crawford had a lot of injury problems, and I think signing Cam Ward will be a big difference. But before we get into the defense and goaltending, I first want to look at the forwards, because the forwards is very interesting, and we have a lot of young guys for the Blackhawks coming up. So let's look at the forwards for the lineup predictions. So the top line definitely could possibly stay the same. Brandon Saad, Jonathan Toews, Alex DeBrincat. Alex DeBrincat was probably like the one and only bright spot of last year. Him coming in, the expectations were not so high. I mean, being a second round pick, obviously I was like killing the Leafs for missing on DeBrincat, but DeBrincat is definitely a top 6 forward. It's no question about it. I think Blackhawks fans are definitely hoping for him to repeat of what he did last year. And in the second line, Patty Kane and Nick Schmaltz, who were definitely developing some chemistry at some points in the year. And then on that left wing, we'll see if he's on his off wing as well, but Dylan Sikura. So if you guys haven't heard of him, he's an Aurora native from Ontario. He really has impressed a lot of fans and a lot of people so far in the prospect tournament. I mean, training camp opens up Friday for a lot of teams, Thursday for some teams. For a guy that played OJHL, if you guys don't know what that is, that's Junior A in Ontario, went to university, and now only 23, he has an opportunity to crack an NHL roster and jump right into a top 6 role, because of the fact that the Blackhawks do have a lot of holes on their wings. And that brings me down to their third line left winger in Victor Eitchel. If you guys are not familiar with him as well, played like 6 games with the Blackhawks last year, 5 with Rockford. He played in the Swedish league, and the points were pretty good. But then he came into Rockford and Chicago in the season and played like 11 games, like I said, in total, and only got 2 points, which obviously isn't great. But this was the big one. In the playoffs, he got about, I could be wrong here, but he got, if not a point, maybe even more than a point per game in the playoffs for Rockford. They had about 13 games total in that playoff stretch. And Victor Eitchel at 6'5" was like huge in their playoffs for Rockford. Even just on the one goal, using his body off the boards, cutting in and scoring like a really nice goal. I think Victor Eitchel, Dylan Sikura, and I'm going to talk about Dominic Cahoon. I think those 3 guys, the young guys, are the big guys to watch out for this year. And then on that third line, Artem Anisimov obviously came from Columbus. For Anisimov, obviously played some time with Patty Kane. I think we're seeing a lot of center depth issues in the league. I think if you spread it out with Schmaltz, with Kane, and then Anisimov in that third line role, I think that gives the better opportunity to give the Blackhawks a run into the playoffs. Not through the playoffs, like I said. I don't think that they're there yet again. I think they might have to go through a rebuild, but we'll see what happens with this team. And then John Hayden on the right wing, kind of a rough, tough guy. He's no enforcer, but he's definitely like with Eitchel and Hayden on that line. Hayden not as big as Eitchel, obviously, but I think that could be like a typical third checking line. And Chris Kunitz, obviously the vet, gets in on that fourth line with Marcus Kruger, who returns to Chicago. Not the best contract for the guy. And then David Kampf. Hopefully that's how you spell his, or pronounce his name. But Not too familiar with that guy, but again, 23 years old, young and up and coming, like the same situation as the other four guys, given the opportunity. And then you guys will notice once you go through the defensemen, usually throughout my videos, I just put out the 23-man roster. There's going to be 24 players mentioned on this video, and that is because probably the storylines. Dominic Cahoon is another guy in the prospect tournament that has really opened some eyeballs to people. Like, he is ripping it up with Dylan Sikura right now. And Tyler Sikura, 3 years older, 26, also played in the OJHL. And I love those stories, starting in the OJHL, because that's like so under the radar. Usually when you start there and you play a couple of years, it's really hard to work your way up. And these two guys, brothers, like made the effort and went to university, and now look at them. Sikura just signed, went undrafted obviously, but signed with the Blackhawks in like May or April, whatever it was, to a 1-year contract. So he'll be given an opportunity as well. Maybe the brothers will play on the same team. I have him just on the outside, along with Dominic Cahoon, because I think Sikura has gotten more looks, was drafted by the team. Cahoon, coming from Czech Republic, played for Sudbury at the start of his career, or when he was like 18, 19, obviously. So I think, as well as Jordan Schrader, who's gotten some NHL time with Columbus and Vancouver, I think those three guys I just have on the outside, but I think they're going to be given every opportunity to make the team. And then on defense, obviously Duncan Keith and Brent Seabrook past their prime, but they're still going to be in the top 4 role. If they're partners, great. Maybe they change it up because if they both slow down a bit. But I think Keith still showed some signs of the Duncan Keith we know last year. I think it's more Seabrook that's slowing down. Connor Murphy got in the trade for Nick Jarmelson from Arizona. Young guy, like not too young, like 27 or whatever, but solid guy. I think he's pretty underrated. I mean, maybe not for the cap, but he's not really noticed by a lot of people. He's definitely like a good number 4 on a lot of teams, maybe 5, if I'm stretching it a bit there. But I think with this Blackhawks team, you got to be a little optimistic because of how bad that they had it last year. And then Eric Gustafson, he started off a lot of offensive potential. I think maybe he can be given an opportunity with Chicago. Brendan Manning, tough guy with Philly. He was the guy, if you guys remember, that tried to rough up Connor McDavid a couple times. He's the one that hurt Connor McDavid for the year. He wants to bring that physical aspect to Chicago. I mean, you know what? If you have a mobile aspect to your game and can bring some physicality as well, you know, can be a pretty solid defenseman. He got signed for 2.25, so that's no slouch there. And then Joan Ruda from Czech Republic, he'll be in that lineup as well. With as long as like he's like more of a, I'm trying to like, I don't want to compare him to Polak, but he's definitely more of an old school style in some ways. But I would say like he's definitely a guy that can play a 5-6 role. And then Gustav Forsling, kind of been up and down. In some parts, everyone's like really excited about this guy, but then everyone kind of just realizes like he's probably just gonna be like a 5-6 guy as well. I have him just on the outside as 7. But when they brought him in from Vancouver, it definitely looked like he had like an opportunity with Chicago there. And then Corey Crawford, Cam Ward, I think that's a pretty decent duo. I think bringing in Cam Ward was majority for the reason that Corey Crawford has had a lot of injury problems and Cam Ward hasn't really been consistent. Maybe those two guys can bounce off each other, one with injuries, one with inconsistency issues. So maybe that works out. We'll see. But that is basically it. Like, I wanted to keep this fairly short. I try to give as much detail to you guys as possible. But at the end of the day, it's really up to management as well, because for the Blackhawks, Stan Bowman, they brought together a team for so many years where every year they would have cap problems. You saw it. They had to trade Dustin Byfuglien. They had to trade Andrew Ladd. They had to trade Patrick Sharp. They had to trade Artemi Panarin, the bread man. There's so many guys that the Blackhawks had to trade, and now it's kind of caught up to them after getting sucked up with 10.5 each with Kane and Toews. Obviously, where the cap's going, that contract for Kane is definitely good. But for Toews, not so much. because of where he's at right now. And I really love Toews, and I want you guys to see my face when I say this. I hope Jonathan Toews regenerates himself. I hope he does well this year because a lot of people hate on him, and he, especially with World Juniors when he was younger, I loved the guy. He was one of my favorite players. Obviously, I haven't over the years followed Chicago as close. I'm a Leafs fan. Obviously live in Canada. So for Toews, a Canadian, I want to see him do well. I want to see him get back to that top 5 two-way center in the league. So I hope he does that. And then for the Blackhawks, like I said, a fringe team right now, but fans for Chicago, I hope the Blackhawks do well. Obviously being an Original Six team, and I mean they've won 3 cups, and maybe it's okay for them to have a couple of years of suffering or a few years of rebuild. But at the end of the day, the Blackhawks still have Patty Kane, and I think that he can do some damage and get 90 to 100 points this year and make a name for himself again, because for some reason Patty Kane has been forgotten. So thank you guys for watching this video. Please subscribe, like I said. Hop on right now. We're going to be doing a lot of content. Of course, you've been seeing a lot of me lately, but we'll be getting Mitch Mullany back on a lot. Fiddy Trent, don't forget about him. Austin Sobalski, diehard Lightning fan, of course. I think he'll get out and release hopefully his Lightning. Maybe I jump in. Who jumps in? I don't know, but maybe he'll release that Lightning preview, as well as we're going to get some new faces on the channel. So thank you guys, and we always appreciate your support. So get in those comments, like the videos, and peace out.